Hello, dear friends. Today is the 27th of June, Friday, and Washington continues to shake up the scandal about the strike by B-2 bombers on Iranian nuclear facilities. I have already told you the essence of the question, which sounds quite simple. Is this program destroyed or not? And if it is not destroyed, then why and what to do now? Why does this address Washington? Because most likely the presidency of Donald Trump can be put on the map with much more distant or far-reaching consequences than the fate of Trump himself. Even the fate of the world can be put on the map to a considerable extent. Today, for the first time, I responded to the situation with this question in China. The newspaper South China Morning Post writes, instead of tearing off the Tigran nuclear program, Israeli and American strikes on Iranian objects last week perhaps hit international efforts on the non-spread of nuclear weapons. This is the first. Second, analysts warn that these attacks may not only push Iran to accelerate its nuclear weapons program, but also encourage such countries as China and North Korea to expand their arsenal of nuclear weapons. Third, in their opinion, warning strikes also create a precedent that can be used by U.S. opponents to justify similar actions in response to any serious attempt by U.S. partners in the Asian-Pacific region to create their own nuclear weapons. We are talking about such countries as Japan and, to some extent, the Philippines, which, against the background of China's nuclear program, express the growth in aggressiveness of Russia's actions because it seems to them that it makes sense to create their own nuclear weapons. Well, South Korea also belongs to the same state, which is concerned that North Korea develops its own nuclear arsenal. And does this on the basis of the Russian-Korean Agreement on Mutual Assistance, which gives this nuclear program in North Korea a particularly evil. Meaning, in another article, the South China Morning Post notes that China should be on guard from now on, so that the United States does not involve it in the war because of its allies. The return of Donald Trump to the White House, according to experts, leads to an increase in military conflicts and an increase in uncertainty. This is such a broad article. This second point is that an invisible feature of international relations is that small countries, so to speak, or allies of large nuclear states, begin to show great activity or even aggression in their foreign policy. And so it can all come out as a collision between their, so to speak, patrons, large nuclear states. But here, apparently, there is a view of Israel for which, as the Chinese believe, the United States is involved in this war. Also, they believe in the analogy that something like this can happen in Southeast Asia, the South China Sea, where small clashes are taking place. The fight is being fought for every square kilometer of the territory of this South China Sea. In this fight, China, the Philippines, Vietnam, and the islands are actively participating. They are trying to block the way for each other, for the ships of another state to the territory that is considered to be theirs. The same applies to Taiwan. It seems that China is concerned about the growing trend that because of the small states there may be a confrontation of large states, such as patrons or senior patrons according to the respective security agreements. This may lead to nuclear war, and immediately the issue of Taiwan comes to the fore. Could the dispute over Taiwan lead to such a collision as the collision of the United States with Iran? Well, the question arises. First of all, the most important thing is the issue of the non-spread of nuclear weapons. And the second question is that this nuclear weapon may have an additional meaning. There was a taboo back then, and now, by and large, wars can take place around it. Nuclear objects or near-nuclear objects can be bombed. Nobody knows what is going on there and what consequences this near-nuclear object may have. But in general, this is accompanied by, I also noticed that the Chinese here mainly write about their concern for the escalation of the situation in Southeast Asia. They do not say anything about Europe and what concerns Russia, NATO. That is, it gives the impression that they somehow want to move away. From their obsessive ally in the face of Russia, in the face of Putin. Well, and somewhere, somehow expressing these worries, they send signal to Washington that let's somehow discuss everything in bilateral relations and reduce the tension. Meanwhile, yesterday, the Congress of the United States held a closed hearing on where uranium, centrifuges, and other accompanying materials and equipment were located, which, in theory, should have been destroyed by the American strike on nuclear facilities. It must be said that this issue for the administration, thanks to the efforts of the administration itself, first of all, Trump himself, acquired such a multi-dimensional meaning. Well, first of all, just the day before these elections were held, a well-known newspaper called Wired is a resource that covers the issues of scientific and technical, all kinds of developments. IT, that is, so to speak, a respected, recognized resource that covers political, technological issues of the development of advanced technologies. He published an article there which, in fact, grabbed the hand of Trump and his closest PR circle of assistants on the disinformation that they threw in literally right after the American B-2 was bombed. And they still haven't come out of the Iranian airspace, as Trump posted on his social media pages a message that the objects were completely destroyed. As he said, obliterated. Obliterated is, by and large, an American analyst. I listened to one of them who was the deputy director of the National Intelligence. He was responsible for the composition of daily briefings and regular assessments of the national security threats of the United States. He was one of the highest analysts. He held one of the highest positions for quite a long time. Now he is retired for a long time, so he said that obliterated is used when it means that an object is rubbed off the face of the earth. And that's it, it's gone, it disappeared. And then in his speech, he used the word Donald Trump. At the same time, what happened? Wyatt conducted an investigation, and it turned out that in the confirmation of this statement, which, I repeat, was first made in his social network, Trump placed an anonymous account where it was written that the object obliterated was destroyed. Well, Wilde looked at what kind of anonymous account it was. It was not the intelligence of the United States as it were supposed to be. Where else should the President of the United States get the information from? And it was an anonymous account of an Israeli company for the production of clothes. No more, no less. That is, the President of the United States thought that this was a real moment, literally a few minutes after the bombing of Iranian objects. Because this account, this resource, knows the best in the world. Well, then it went. His efforts, Trump's efforts, were captured by his closest ally from a Fox channel called Hannity. There is such a person there, a real fighter for Trump's cause. He posted a video in his Instagram account, allegedly a video of this blow, which was reported by B2 on a nuclear object in Iran, Fordo. The research of this video, which was conducted by this same resource, showed that it was filmed in 1924 and not in Iran, but in Syria. And in a different way, and the blow was in a different country, and the time was different, and the objects were different. Well, that's how it works. And then, when this report came up, which, I repeat, now it was somehow erased by representatives of the administration, call it only the DIA report, that is, military intelligence. In fact, this is an assessment by the experts of the Central Command, that is, those people who planned and organized the application of this blow. And they gathered there for this, since the blow was unprecedented, the best specialists of the United States of America, and who better than them could calculate all this. So they wrote it, fresh, so to speak, traces, apparently checking the parameters that could be removed from this bomb. I told them there are special sensors that allow specialists to do it, although approximately, nevertheless. Well, they sent it to military intelligence, and since then the administration, well, that is, the Minister of Defense, he jumps out of his pants and shouts that, doubting the fact that this object was rubbed off the face of the earth, you humiliate the American president and you insult our great, magnificent pilots. Although what kind of relationship do pilots have to this? They are military, they have fulfilled their task, and that's it. In short, yesterday there was a meeting. Yesterday there was a speech of the so-called minister, who scolded the media for not treating Trump well and treating American pilots badly. But it turned out that people who came out of these closed doors, especially Senator Lindsey Graham, said that now, in general, Graham expressed himself in such a way that now the most important thing is not even destroyed or not destroyed, but in general, where is it? That is, the most terrible thing is the unknown. He said the same thing. The most terrible thing in this matter is the damn unknown. The next thing that became known is that no one can really say where. The uranium is now where the equipment is located and in what quantity, in what condition, and so on. There is even uncertainty about where this uranium, centrifuge, and other equipment was originally located. That is, Trump is the most knowledgeable person we have, who draws from anonymous accounts of women's clothing stores. I'm sorry, not necessarily women's, just clothes, an Israeli store. Yes, he suggested that uranium and centrifuges were in Ford where they were bombed, and others claim that maybe even more and maybe the main part was in Natanz. And there is the Kalang mountain, and it is deeper. That is, the object is located at a depth of about 100 meters, while in Ford this depth was estimated to be 60–90. That is, now it turns out that in Natanz, in this mountain, there is a much deeper layup, there are tunnels, a much more deflated system. And maybe some people think that it was there that the main part of this uranium was 60% and centrifuge. Others say that there may be a third, or rather that it may be somewhere else, in particular in Isfahan. And there were also secret objects that many do not even know about. Gross, who, in theory, was supposed to be the best known from the entire Western world, better known to everyone because, well, poor thing, but he was. Supposed to have, he was given access as a representative of an organization, yes, these objects. So he firmly holds on to his opinion that a significant part of the enriched uranium, close to the arms one, remains under the control of Iran. That is, he believes that he does not exclude that it could leave Iran, but he believes that it is still under the control of Iran. I don't know if they brought everything, but the facts indicate that they brought a significant part, that is, it is intact. According to him, this uranium was stored in containers, quite small, to be placed in the trunk of a regular car. European officials said on Thursday that their preliminary assessment also indicates that Iran has taken out the reserves. Where did these reserves go? I will report to you separately today. From yesterday's closed hearings, it is possible to draw a conclusion or assumption. That the general nuclear program of Iran may be slowed down. Most likely, the whole question of the term is slowed down, either for a few months or, some say, optimistically, maybe for several years. But experts say that even this question is not the main one. That is, the general nuclear program is slowed down. This means that Iranians will not be able to extract new enriched uranium. But it has a huge, about 440 kilograms of 60%, about 200 kilograms of 28%. And this is enough to already make a bomb. So as it is considered, some say the issue is open, and others say that it may take several weeks, and that's it. And that's it. And how? Now the Chinese say, and they are talking in Moscow on propaganda channels, the official person of the Russian Federation, in particular Kargalpalov, the chairman of the Committee on the Affairs of the Armed Forces. Although he is an ex-political worker, but when I heard him, he said on this topic that he had read the text which he had read as a schoolboy. And there, the first point was now, after everything that had happened, Iran will surely continue its nuclear program and will create nuclear weapons. That is all this, the entire course of these debates of yesterday, or not debates, reports listeners, actually means that Iran's ability to make a primitive bomb was only a few months behind. Even if a larger program, that is, the production and enrichment of the production of new nuclear weapons, suffered much more serious damage and was behind for a longer period. Concentrated on this topic, Jim Hinz, congressman, expressed his opinion on the situation. He is the deputy chairman of the committee. On Intelligence of the Chamber of Representatives, a special committee on intelligence of the Chamber of Representatives. Among the Democrats, he is number 1, so that's what he writes about the results of the hearing. The only question that matters now is whether the Iranian regime has everything it needs to create a bomb, and if it does, how quickly can it do it? Think about it, the 12-day war, which, as we said, was all brilliantly carried out, and then the bombs strike in the first place of this kind of character. The noise, the hum of the whole world. As a result, it is unknown whether the Iranian regime has everything it needs to create a bomb. That is, a dry residue nuclear program and what is necessary for the production of a quick atomic bomb. There is no reliable expert information, facts proving that it was all destroyed. Then he writes that the destruction or damage that was inflicted by this object does not matter. If the Iranians moved a sufficient amount of 60% uranium, centrifuge and other instruments to create a bomb to some unknown place, That is, as you can see, it is not just about the movement of uranium, but about the movement of centrifuge and other necessary equipment for the continuation of the program and the production of a nuclear bomb. So, writes the congressman, here are the questions that need to be. Looked for now. First, has Iran moved uranium and has it preserved it? Second, has it moved centrifuges and has it preserved them? Third, has it preserved the metal and other equipment necessary to create a bomb? Fourth, and if so, is it in an unknown place? Again, it is very important where it is in whose hands. Because the most terrible thing is when it turns out that it has been moved, but in whose hands, no one has any idea. If the answer to these questions is positive, the congressman writes, then it is possible that the Iran nuclear program was only slightly delayed. He reminds that this is a 12-day war, a bomb strike. They had the goal to put an end to the Iranian nuclear program. And it is far from clear that this goal was achieved. The initial attempts to find support for some kind of expert analysis. That would confirm that Trump originally made a mistake, made the White House personally ask Trump, apparently personally to Netanyahu, asked for help. Well, after a while, the White House began to swing around here with a piece of paper. It was the statement of the Israeli organization, which is called, I'm afraid I'm not quite sure how to call it. But it's called, for example, the Agency for Atomic Energy of Israel, which, in general, without referring to any expert conclusions, facts, without referring to the fact that some of the employees of this agency or other units, armed forces, intelligence, or other state institutions of Israel saw it. There was an opinion that the blow is such a force, you know, gentlemen. That is, it was in the style of the blonde of the White House, which said, well, everyone knows that if a 15-ton bomb falls from a great height, then everything is over. It means it is destroyed. The most interesting thing is that there is an Israeli journalist in Washington, a wonderful journalist with tremendous connections. He can call, and he called Trump. He takes the phone number. Hello, Mr. President, I'm so-and-so. And he has conversations with him, recorded. He even wrote articles about this, Vaxis published. So he followed the path of this statement of the Israeli Agency for Atomic Energy. What happens? Well, first of all, as experts say, this agency does not relate to the Israeli intelligence community in any way. And all the PR children, or rather not PR, public relations, so to speak, the statements of this agency, they allegedly go only through the office of the Prime Minister of Israel, to whom Trump addressed. Well, it so happened that the agency, which does not have its own intelligence capabilities, which did not conduct its own investigation, which was not sent to any other investigation of another office or organization of Israel, expressed the opinion that everything is probably very good there. That everything is destroyed, well, it is unlikely that it helped Trump to hold on. That is, the situation is quite tense. And now what happened is what I said when I formulated that at the very beginning, when the first strikes of the Israeli aviation fell on Iran. I said that if after that it will not be established for sure that the nuclear program is destroyed, uranium, the appropriate equipment, or where it is, in any case, that it is whole, there it is in these hands. Now let's go, we'll figure it out, we'll see it all, then the situation arises critical. Well, imagine the situation, well, in addition to the fact that the most terrible, the worst option, God forbid, all this will be in the hands of ISIS or something like that. the character of the organization, which is under the control of Quids and the guards of the Islamic Revolution, Iranian, there is enough. Not even talking about it, imagine the situation that it appears in the hands of the forces or under the command of the forces, which are hostile to the interests of the United States and the Western world in general. And they come into contact with President Trump and say, "Mr. President, do you understand that your political destiny depends on what we will do next? We will, and maybe we will not do it." You can imagine that with President Trump, who felt that he was so terrible that everyone would be silent and would not breathe, bad people in this world, autocrats and other scoundrels. And now it will turn out that during his presidency, Iran is experiencing a nuclear bomb. This will be the end of political life and career, not only of Trump, but also of all those who brought him to power, the magician of this movement, and so on. That is, it will be just a personal political catastrophe. Therefore, the excitement, the impetus is high. And as I said, there was no situation when the special services of the United States and Israel, having opened their eyes, will run all over the world and look for where this uranium and other equipment is. But let's now imagine where all this can be. What I will tell you next is collected from what is called open source, OSINT, that is, intelligence for information from open sources. We are already used to the fact that this is what it is. This is not a joke intelligence from open sources. As I told you, in any intelligence of the world, somewhere about 80% of the information. In any case, the factology is information from open sources. But you need to be able to get another 20 and then put all this together, put it all together, analyze it so that it really turns out to be complete, real, cool intelligence. Well, let's see what can be and where they are looking for now. As I remember, in childhood there was a poem about Uncle Stepa, or, in general, about Soviet children. They are looking for firefighters, they are looking for police. That's how they are looking for Mossad, they are looking for CIA, DIA, and other leaders of world intelligence. The first assumption is that this uranium can still be on the territory of Iran and be in Mount Kalang. It's called Pikaxi Mountain in Farsi. It's located not far from Natanz. They say that it's just a few minutes away from there. It's about 140 miles from Fordo. It's assumed that this one can be there. It's probably about 400 kilograms of uranium, 60%, at a depth of 100 to 300 meters. This fortified and little-known place has become a priority for Iran lately, before this 12-day war. The international agency MAGATE has already demanded access to this location, but there is no clear evidence from MAGATE that this uranium was taken from there. Nevertheless, it is believed to be the most likely because if you hide somewhere on the territory of Iran, it is the deepest place. For some reason, they thought that Fordo was the deepest. It turned out not. Why did they hit Fordo? Because in theory, at least theoretically, these bombs could reach a depth of 60 meters. Well, the rest are 30, God forbid, but at least 60 meters. And here 100, 300, even theoretically, this bomb could not fly or fall. Therefore, too, you understand, the planners of this event to a considerable extent went along with the political task. That is, they were assigned a political task. Not professional, that is, to 100% destroy so that there is no more talk, but political, to hit, so that later it was possible to say that we abandoned. Well, indeed, we need to somehow freeze or postpone as long as possible the development of the Iranian nuclear program. Therefore, apparently in the Kalang mountain, let's hit where? In general, looking for a lost tank where the flashlight is on the street in that place, that's about how it works. Perhaps some third object about Kalang is possible. According to preliminary assessment, this is what, I repeat, was leaked into the open source. According to the preliminary assessment of DIA, this is GOR or GRU, the Pentagon's military intelligence. A large part of the uranium could be urgently transferred to the third object, which Iran allegedly notified MAGATE in advance. This implies the strategy of dissipation, that is, the existing materials, all these assets, they were not only extracted, but they were masked and sprayed. In smaller quantities, but on a larger number of separate objects of storage. One more option is assumed that the burial of this uranium and the appropriate equipment was made directly under the attack structures, that is, it was actually buried. At the same time, it refers to the opinion of Vice President Vance and the Delhi Beast newspaper, who assumed that part of the uranium could simply be buried deep under the former objects. That is, kind of hidden in ruins. This allows you to hide uranium and other materials from the bombs, designed for deep-seated mines but not for specially prepared bunkers. What services are conducting the search? Well, of course, the Central Intelligence Department. Redcliffe's director announced that the United States has reliable data on the serious damage to the Iranian nuclear program, but which, characteristically, did not confirm the fate of uranium. Redcliffe is one of the most devoted people to President Trump. At the time of the first condemnation, he was appointed to the position that Tulsi Gabbard, the director of the National Intelligence, is now in charge. And when there was already an investigation against Trump about impeachment, he was engaged in hiding, as it is believed, the information that the United States Intelligence Agency in America had, which could help. To prove that Trump had done something wrong, that's why he was removed. Trump was forced to remove him under pressure. Therefore, the fact that he says that there is serious damage, well, probably there is. Quite a number of bombs were dropped, but the fact that he does not confirm that the uranium is completely destroyed, it is expensive. He, unlike Hannity, whom I have just told, showed in the video that was made last year in Syria, he did not say, repeating Trump, that uranium is destroyed. This is the CIA, then there is military intelligence, the Pentagon, the CIA. There, again, according to the leaks, they believe that uranium is possible and possibly the centrifuge. One of the viewers wrote to me here and said, it is unlikely, how hard it is to believe. Gentlemen, the question of faith is the question of the church. If you are interested in faith, go to the church. There is no need to believe. Here either you know or you do not know, or a collection of data allows you to come to a conclusion. Yes or no conclusion. Well, the DIA considers, whether you believe them or not, that Yury and I, probably centrifuges, were taken to some unknown third object. MAGATE requires access to unknown objects, but this mountain Kalang, there are hidden objects. Which are supposed to exist, but no one knows for sure. So now MAGATE is breaking through there, but it cannot confirm the location of the materials and the presence of their location there. Well, you probably know that the Iranian parliament has already made a decision to interrupt all relations with the organizations of biological nations and with MAGATE. Thus, everything will be closed, and the Israeli intelligence. To be honest, I have three hopes. If I have any, I hope for the Israeli intelligence. There is information, according to some Israeli mass media, which claims that part of the centrifuge. Again, centrifuge, not just uranium, but centrifuges can be hidden there in this mountain Kalang, and there is something similar to an underground fortress. And this leak was made, in my opinion, by Reuters. Reuters agency wrote about it. If you evaluate what is available, so to speak, with the appropriate specialists, it turns out that the mountain Kalang is the most likely place. This is a deep underground fortification where, if already hidden, then to the depth, to which the American bomb DBU-57 will definitely not fall. Then, in the second place, according to the possibility of probability, there is a third object. This is such a hidden alternative, but by the third object, I do not exclude that it is not one, but there are several of them. There were messages that a significant part of this Iranian nuclear program was so classified that even the name and number of those objects that are involved in it are still unknown, maybe on one of them. Then the third probably is the burial under its own, that is, the object where it was located, now even lower under this, let's say, Fordo, under the debris that appeared as a result of the impact of these rockets. Well, and then those actions that were observed, I often talked about the pictures, several dozens of trucks, and within a few days. These actions indicate a pre-prepared evacuation scheme, that is, the assets were in safety. It was believed that apparently the Iranian authorities believed that if these assets remained in the Fordo, then they would be able to leave there. It is necessary to die. But I must say that Trump, in one of his posts where he held a polemic with critics, his confidence in the destruction of this program, he said that they did not have time to evacuate. The bombers flew quickly for 15 hours. He had been threatening for so many days, and he was threatening seriously, but probably these threats were enough for people with common sense to think that after such threats it is better to hide the relevant material. At the same time, it is emphasized that this uranium, enriched up to 60%, is the most valuable thing that Iran has now. It is a treasure of the nation with the help of which, if it is, it can be solved by a huge task. Well, I put one task in a few months. Atomic bombs are tested somewhere in the mountains, and that's it. The situation has changed dramatically all over the world. Well, there may be other more terrible options. Therefore, apparently, since this is the most valuable thing, the treasures in the state's command apparently belong to it in the appropriate way. In any case, special services in any case come from the United States. Therefore, it is assumed in the end that Iran has taken out significant reserves of uranium and possibly centrifuges before the B-2 strike. But this Picasso mountain is a priority object for further investigation. Let's see how the case goes. That is, both American and U.S. intelligence are actively working on the discovery of these reserves. Is it possible for Russia to be involved in the issue that probably interests everyone, the evacuation operation of this uranium, centrifuge, and corresponding equipment? It is believed that it is possible. The main way is from the well-known formula, look for someone who benefits from it. Russia, for the Putin regime, it would be extremely profitable. but I told you on the map the presidency of Trump has been put. And because, as Trump says, he behaves in relation to Putin, there is a feeling that Putin has the levers of control over Trump. Well, if that's all, then that's all. If Donald's dear friend doesn't do what his friend Putin wants, then somewhere in the mountains of the same Ford, or in another mountain of Iran, maybe someday a nuclear explosion will occur, and then the Middle East will shudder, and together with it, the Trump administration. That is, Russia is interested to a large extent in strategic motives. It has 3 sharp reasons to contribute to the movement of uranium. First of all, it is nuclear blackmail from the West with other people's hands. This is what I was talking about when, in fact, weapons appear in the hands of other people's flags. The country, the real owner of this uranium, applies it where it is considered necessary. And the traces lead to Iranian uranium, the traces lead to Iran. This is terrible for Iran itself. This is the most terrible situation which, I told you, in the first half of the 1990s brought here to the horror of military and intelligence specialists. Therefore, it is assumed that Moscow, having such a weapon in its hands, could use the strengthening of the Iranian factor as a tool of pressure on the United States and Israel, especially in the context of the weakening of the Ukrainian front. It is believed, and these moods, these expert estimates, increase the fact that Russia is completely confused there, and things are getting worse and worse on the Ukrainian fronts. Therefore, in this sense, the disappearance of Iran, the movement of it under the control of Russia, one way or another, is an ideal lever of threat from the side of Moscow, but without direct responsibility. That is, you can threaten, you can solve your tasks, but Iran will be responsible, or another state on which this weapon can be disguised. Then, the following between the two countries in recent times, there have been joint exercises, exchanges, and work on the corresponding logistics. In the 23rd and 24th years, Russian-Iranian contacts in the field of PVO, RAB, and logistics were recorded. A number of sources talked about secret visits of Rosatom employees to Iran as part of technical consultations. Officially, this was done to replace the components of nuclear reactors. And in fact, it is believed that this could well be a cover and the main goal could be different. There are even, it is believed, indirect signs of involvement. Well, for example, it has been noted since 2022. Well, in fact, when the beginning of the aggression of Russia against Ukraine just appeared. A significant number of contacts grew in Iran and activity. I even had to face these contacts through the acquaintances of journalists indirectly. These contacts were not just from Russia, but from Iran. It was a network that captured a significant part of Western European countries. There were not only representatives of special services, but also agencies in the face of representatives of organized crime in Russia. And since 1922, contacts between Zur, Al-Quds, and officers in the game have been activated. They jointly engaged in the counteraction of intelligence in the United States of America. It is assumed, as it is the assessment of Western intelligence, Specialists, analysts that the organization, the logistical organization of this hiding of enriched uranium and the appropriate equipment is very difficult. It is a very difficult operation if you set a goal so that it is not noticed, and such a goal was obliged to set. That is, it is extremely difficult without the help of an experienced state. There are leaks that in parallel disappeared nuclear traces in Syria and Venezuela. That is, representatives of the intelligence community and journalists of some investigators noted that recently nuclear traces were also noted in Syria and Venezuela. Not far from the border with the United States of America, and they were associated with Russia. Well, then at some point they disappeared. It is believed that these networks were associated with the Russian Federation and were used to move people, equipment, and isotopes. Well, it was believed that these same connections, these same channels could also be used this time to move, to cover Iran's enriched uranium. Although there are, of course, counterarguments, which should probably also be noted here. But for example, it is assumed that Russia, in theory, should not be interested in nuclear Iran as an uncontrolled factor in the Caspian Asian region. That is, it is difficult with all self-conceit in Moscow to assume that Iran, the representative of Iran's special services, will undoubtedly carry out orders from Moscow. A nuclear bomb will appear and Iran will become completely different, just like Kim Jong-un. There was a long myth about North Korea not being able to play an independent role, and that almost every step taken by North Korea is in line with Beijing. In fact, this is not true. In any case, I am talking to the Chinese here. They say that this is a very difficult cookie, a rocket man. And you simply cannot manipulate him. He will squeeze everything you can out of you. Secondly, it is believed that the Kremlin is afraid of the Second Canada, which can become too independent and unpredictable a player. And China, if Putin asks Xi will confirm this. And finally, the move of Uranus is a very risky operation. It is very difficult to hide the ends in the water. But so far, if such an operation took place, it should have been absolutely successful. Because so far not a single intelligence agency in the world has accused Russia directly to have the facts that confirm that Russia was doing this. Therefore, if we evaluate all these options together, it turns out that it is most likely that Russia was able to cooperate in logistics and help Iranians relying on these networks that I told you about. It is believed that probability is the #1 option, somewhere in the region a little above 50%. That is, it is likely but not super likely, so to speak. Then the second option is less likely because Russia took part in the direct withdrawal or provided cover for this operation. Well, finally, there is a significant less likely that Russia completely initiated and carried out or took full control of this operation. And now it is somewhere there, either in Altai or somewhere else in the nuclear facilities of Russia. Therefore, Russia could play the role of an invisible logistic or insured observer, especially if the disappearance of Iran was an agreed action to delay time, to destabilize the region and exchange geopolitical concessions. That is, they can play together with China, together with North Korea and Russia, help Iran get out of this situation with minimal losses. But at least there is no smoking gun that would directly indicate the key role of Russia in hiding these materials and equipment. But we need to pay attention to the fact that today in the Telegram channels that connect directly or indirectly with the Russian Federation General Staff, that is, in fact, the channels of spreading the directed information, it was noted there that Trump seems to have suddenly made an offer to Iran on how the issue would be resolved further. And the first point is that Iran will not be allowed to enrich uranium in any way, even for civilian purposes. But Iran will be given $3.3 billion for the development of nuclear energy. A regional organization will be created there that will produce the uranium needed for this. And finally, a full carte blanche, a green light for the export of Iranian oil. And this, as expected, can be of interest to most of China, which is a significant part. In my opinion, Iran was the first place again. They have been dividing this place all the time, the first and second place of Saudi Arabia. And now they give China the opportunity to get Iranian oil at an almost unquestionable price. That is, there is no conversation about changing the regime, about further bombing of Iran. And I am very careful with all these channels, Telegram channels, but from other sources which have nothing to do with Russia, such. Information is confirmed that such a position, such a proposal can be made. From what sources and why, I will tell you in the next video. I listened to a very interesting story of a very unaware person who is aware of how this 12-day war was organized. And I will tell you in the next video with the following comments. Well, gentlemen, everyone is looking for enriched uranium. There is a lot on the map. Well, as always, glory to the Ukrainian armed forces. The enemy will be defeated, the victory will be ours. To you, dear friends, endurance, courage, and firm faith in our inevitable victory. See you soon.